Hi world! This is where I'm at. This is where I'm at. Just a sec. Shoo-ba-doo-ba-da-ba. There we go. Just adjusting the light here. Look at my pretty face. I'm so pretty. Scraggly and pretty. So, this week has felt like no week at all. Uh, Not in a good way. I have been so tired this week, so incredibly tired. I just want to sleep my day away. As I'm recording this on a Sunday, I just woke up from a nap, and I'm still very tired. So the reason this has felt like no week at all is I am not in any way a morning person, not even a little bit. I am subhuman during the morning, which thankfully my wife finds funny, which compensates for the fact that she finds it really frustrating. But that state of being a morning person has basically been that state of not being a morning person, I should say, has basically been what this week has felt like. I've just walked around in a torpor of drowsiness. I've also I think noticed something about how the medicine is affecting me. I think my appetite is being decreased by the medicine. And part of my drowsiness comes from the fact that I don't feel the hunger associated with that, but that doesn't mean that the other symptoms of being hungry don't rear their heads. So a consequence of that is simply that I think I'm sleepy, but I'm actually hungry. That's a working theory, at least. So of course that's made everything I've tried to do this week incredibly difficult. I have been very slow to get anything done, and I've also, like, honestly, just trying to figure out when is it okay for me to take a nap has been a draining minefield to navigate. I followed my own advice. I asked for help. I made sure that my lovely wife would wake me up, because when it comes to negotiating with myself and an alarm clock, I can be so extremely reasonable. Just, hey boss, I need 5 more minutes, and then me as a boss will go, you know what? Yes, you do. So it's nice that I've had someone else to kick me out of the couch and out of bed. But it does mean that there's been less initiative to do things from my side, which has made this week more difficult. Another thing, which is something I sadly fall into quite frequently, is that I tend to sometimes hyper focus on something that used to make me happy, and then just try and drill into that in order to achieve that old state of happiness. But I become so focused on the task itself, on the activity itself, that I forget to take stock of whether or not it's, so to speak, worth it. So I've been writing a lot, and I've been reading a lot, because I felt like I ought to, because I felt like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It has helped the past couple of weeks to do that. That has drained me more this week without me realizing. So it's another lesson I'm learning here. Constant vigilance is really required when you're trying to take care of yourself with these mental illnesses. What tricks you're using has to vary from week to week, because what is draining one week might be giving you more energy another week, and vice versa. So it's been a challenging week, but I think I've learned something from it. So, silver lining. And from that silver lining, let's move on to something that makes me happy. Much like when I talked about Spider-Man eons ago, Toy Story is something that has always existed in my brain from my own point of view. I don't remember seeing the first Toy Story movie for the first time. However, I do have a lot of memories of rewatching Toy Story and rewatching Toy Story 2, and then also Toy Story 3. Again and again and again. It was almost I almost can't think of a better word than almost a religious practice for my mother and me. As a kid, I just loved the concept so much, and I was so enamored with the idea of my toys being alive. I because every 5-year-old is some version of an idiot, but I do remember when I lived in Western Jutland as a kid that I would try and trick my toys. So I would clean my room and then very lightly announce, "I'm leaving the house, going to see my friend Alexander. I won't be back for a long time. Sure hope nothing happens while I'm out of the room. Okay, bye." Aha! Sadly, my toys were too clever by half to fall for that obvious trick, which is why I later decided to take up acting as a hobby so I could learn how to catch them off guard. Having that memory of that older me sort of just emphasizes for me how in love I was with those movies from a very, very young age. But what is fantastic about them is no matter what age I have been seeing them at, I found something to cherish about them. They're fun. They're eminently quotable. In fact, my mother and I around the dinner table, if we could find a way to reply in a Toy Story quote, it would delight her and me and incite eye rolling and groans from everyone else present. And I say that used to happen. That very much still happens. Pretty much every single time that I go to visit. But the reason that they have stayed my favorite movies is they are incredibly loaded. I think it's almost like the Pixar law that there are so many layers of appreciation to every single movie that you see. When you pitch something like, what if your toys were secretly alive and they had a life of their own? No one immediately thinks yes. And the central theme about these toys should be dealing with finality. That's really what the first three movies especially deal with. First movie, you have Woody, who needs to deal with the finality of no longer being Andy's favorite toy because Buzz enters into the picture. As a consequence of that, the entire movie is him looking at this change and, in a sense, trying to refuse it, trying to deny it, which is what costs him a lot. What incites a lot of the problems in the movie. And the moment the movie starts going the main character's way again is when they embrace the change that they're caught up in. Then you have the second movie, which deals with Woody needing to acknowledge the fact that at some point Andy's gonna grow up. And as a consequence of that, he needs to understand that he knows that this is something that has an ending, a finality, and it's tempting for him for a moment just to upend the finality, to yearn for something that gives him a sense of eternity.
How long will it last, Woody? Do you really think Andy is going to take you to college? Or on his honeymoon? Andy's growing up, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's your choice, Woody. You can go back, or you can stay with us and last forever.
And of course, obvious moral perhaps, but he needs to embrace that everything ends. Andy's childhood is gonna end and lessen his grief in any way. You only thing you can do is just hold on to it while you have it, and then learn to live with the fact that this ends. And when you have two movies that deal with the concept of embracing change. Everything ends. When you then get to the third movie, you kind of have to pull the trigger on the entire idea of finality. So, Toy Story 3 is just laden with themes about death. Once you see that theme, that motif running through it, it's really hard not just to appreciate how in depth this is shown. When they're still at Andy's house, they talk about what it's gonna be like to live on the attic. Um, what's it like up there? They are talking about it through the lens of an afterlife. When they're in the daycare, they're experiencing the Catholic purgatory. For those unfamiliar, there was an idea in Catholicism, don't know if it's still there, I'm not a Catholic, but historically there was an idea that if you weren't so bad a person that you didn't deserve to go to hell, but you weren't so good a person you couldn't enter into heaven, what you could do was you could, what would happen to you would be that you would live in purgatory, where you would be tortured for a while before you were purified enough to enter into heaven. Now, why do I bring this up? Well,
The children in the caterpillar room are not age appropriate for me and my friends. We respectfully request a transfer to the butterfly room.
Well, request granted. We're calling you up to the big leagues, son. From now on, you'll have anything you want.
Excellent. I'll go get my friends.
Whoa, hold on there, boss. Those caterpillar kids need someone to play with.
But my friends don't belong there.
Oh, none of us do. I agree, which is why, for the good of our community, we ask the newer toys, the stronger ones, to take on the hardships the rest of us can't bear anymore.
yeah, that'd be why. The things they're experiencing in the kindergarten is purgatory. What other thing that seems kind of afterlifey happens in this movie?
I don't think that's daylight.
It's bothering the hell out of me. I really can't. Hell, I really can't think of... Wait. And finally, the movie ends with a form of reincarnation. All of this told through the frame of what if toys were alive, and all three of these movies told through the frame of essentially a prison break movie. Like every single movie involves them in one way or another being stuck somewhere they don't want to be, and then needing to fix that. That is like the creativity in that, the richness of the themes, and on top of it, it's just funny and quotable. I haven't had time enough with Toy Story 4 to let it enter into my internal pantheon of the Toy Story verse, but I have seen it once and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Toy Story is something I think about regularly. It's my favorite movies. I see them all the time, and no matter where I've been at in my life, it has been there to offer solace or wisdom or just a sense of comfort with the familiarity I have with all these characters. So yes, it is something that brings me ever so much joy. I haven't talked so much about the themes of finality in Toy Story. It seems appropriate that I this week also talk about another concept of finality, because it's a lesson that I see my self having had to learn, and that I've also seen a lot of people around me having had to learn, and that is this delusion of returning to your old self. And I say delusion because I think it is impossible, but it is so incredibly alluring a finish line that most people need to, at some point or another, if they're dealing with a mental illness, understand that this old self is an unattainable goal. Now, let me back up a little bit and explain my terminology here. When I refer to my own personal old self, I remember a version of me during my first 2 or 3 years in uni. And when I think back on that guy, I think, damn, what an industrious bastard that guy was. Maybe I wouldn't use the word bastard. I don't mean to degrade my past self in that sense, but I'm still genuinely impressed with all the stuff I could do at the time. I managed to keep my head above waters at uni. I had a very rich social life, and I always had this internal clock of, oh, it's been a while since I've seen Vibeke, or it's been a while since I've seen this other friend of mine. So I was really good at taking at initiating contact and going, hey, I haven't seen you in ages, do you have time to meet for a cup of coffee or a beer or something? I would also be able to do the occasional piece of work to supplement my income. And on top of that, I had my hobbies like role-playing and theater. Theater especially during this time took up an awful lot of time for me. I think back on myself being incredibly industrious, and as you perhaps can tell from the first section of this video, that is not me anymore. I am not near that person. It costs too much for me to be that that productive, so to speak. And in my mind, it is very alluring to see my progress through these diseases in my mind as ending up with me returning to that old self. Whenever I get close to being that industrious again, I can feel myself getting sick again. It's not actually a stable place for me to return to. 2 episodes ago, I mentioned a friend who was committed to the psych ward of the hospital, and I think that was really tough with hearing her talk about the other friends that visited her. Was many of them spoke about when they'd get the old her back, when she would be cured, be out of the psych ward, and be back to her old self. And what was rough about that was she knew that wouldn't happen. The trauma she'd been through had eliminated her old self, and there was getting better ahead of her, but there was no returning to her old self. Her being surrounded by these expectations of something that would never happen was not making things easier for her. I say that makes it rough to be surrounded by people who expect you to return to your old self, but it's not easier when those expectations come from yourself. I think it's worth taking to heart that struggling with an illness and getting better is itself a transformative experience. That transformative experience makes a new self. Is this new self a better self? Maybe, but I don't think it's useful to think in terms of better or worse here. There was a Say Frank video eons ago talking about the advice, be yourself. And he points out why that is terrible advice.
Be yourself? Never mind the logical absurdity of it, it can be an incredibly anxiety-provoking thing to hear as a teenager, or an adult for that matter. You know what my self was at that time? Scared as shit, lonely, anxious to the point of insomnia? Being that me was not an option. I didn't have the tools to deal with those parts. But if the me I was supposed to be being was something else, then yes, no shit, I'd love to be that. Do you have the rest of the instructions, jackass?
But what he ends up talking about there is the best advice he sees in that regards regard is make yourself the best self. That is essentially what working with this amounts to. I am trying to make myself the best self that it can be. This might shock you guys, but I am very fond of language and I'm very fond of grammar. And what I like about this is best is the superlative version of good. It's, you know, the best. I just explained that I didn't like to use the word better. Well, that's because better is the comparative version. Better invites a competition between past and future and present versions of yourself. Best just means best. And what your best self is entirely determined by the circumstances you're dealing with right now. I am not my better self right now, but in learning how to deal with the side effects of my medicine, in keeping this vlog, in keeping track of how I'm doing, in asking for help, I am actually being my best self. It hurts to have this be my best self when I have a version of me that I can't help but think of as better in my mind. But it's something I need to let go of. My past self may have been able to do stuff that I wish I could do, but my best self is best served by me letting go of those ambitions. In the end, this is a lesson that I repeatedly need to remind myself of. I always think whenever you're engaging on any project, no matter what it is, it's a really good idea to have a solid grasp of what is your goal. What are you actually trying to achieve here? And if my goal is to become my past self, well then I am gonna fail because that is impossible. That past self is no more. It is, for reasons I just went through, alluring to aim for that past self, but it is, like I said, not possible and probably not healthy either. And trying to acknowledge what your best self is, I automatically invite compassion towards myself, a sense of understanding towards myself. And I think that's the best I can do right now. I think for many, that is the best any can do. So yeah, that's those are my thoughts on that matter. Maybe it went a little overly poetical or a little too philosophical there. But hey, it's my vlog. I can do what I want. I'm in charge. So thank you so much, world, for staying with me and for listening in. It means a lot to me. So I hope you'll keep watching and listening to what I have to say here and there. No matter what, though, I'll see you around, world.